Considering the recent death of Eddie Van Halen, Robert dives into what actually happens to your copyrights when you die, and how to best protect them and your family while you're still alive. And now, here's Red Giant Rights Group CEO, Robert King.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining our podcast, Protect Your Copyrights. My name is Robert King. I run a company called Red Giant Rights Group. We started it with the older artist in mind, those older artists who were not aware of all of their rights, particularly given to them by the U.S. Congress. And we also assist surviving family members, most of which don't have any inclination of their rights. They were not artists. They were not in the industry. They have wills, trusts, and estate attorneys handling their estates who know very little, if anything, about copyright law. So we hope that you'll check out all of our podcast episodes and learn what you can. Feel free to reach out to me personally, but let's see what we'll talk about today. Hey, it's Robert King. Thanks for listening to Protect Your Copyrights. Well, this is easily the toughest podcast that we've done so far because it's like a kick in the gut. What's going on in the world? I don't necessarily like to be political in this podcast because we're focused on protecting copyrights. But it is, I think it's apolitical to be concerned about what's going on with the virus, the pandemic that we're under. But what may even be an undiagnosed pandemic is how many celebrities we are losing this year. Now, I've thought about this quite a bit as I get older. I'm 52 years old, and there was, if we think about it, I don't want to get too historical, but if we think about it, the concept of a celebrity really became popular in what, the 30s, 40s, 50s, Bing Crosby maybe, or Errol Flynn maybe, some of these, Cary Grant, maybe some of these early movie stars or singers, and then of course during the 40s, 50s, 60s we have popular singers that of course stand the test of time, like Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett and the like, Ella Fitzgerald. And so then you get into the 50s, 60s, 70s, and these icons, some of which are still alive. So we will naturally, because life is what it is, we will naturally lose them, and we just know a lot more of them because they were celebrities while either we were living, popular while we were living, or we know of them because of their writings or their music or their movies, their classic movies, or whatever it may be. So we seem to see more and more of these celebrity types, popular names pass away more and more each year. And I think because it's not necessarily that more people are passing away every year. It's just that we know these people more. We know more of these people. And so, but nonetheless, either way, it's heartbreaking and shocking every time that it happens. It just, it reminds us all how precious life is, and it reminds us that from a copyright perspective, where I'm going to challenge you today, those of you who are listening in, and hopefully you either own copyrights, or you know somebody who owns copyrights, or you maybe are a surviving family member and don't fully understand the value of the copyrights that have been gifted to you through your talented relative. So I really just want to hit a couple of these that jump out, and because I think it affects all of us. I think that these people have become so ingrained in our way of thinking and in our sphere that it's not. They almost seem like family members. Of course, most of them aren't, or they are not. Period. But it almost seems, Regis Philbin died this year, and how many people grew up watching him on television or woke up to him on television and his shows? Kelly Preston is not only a popular actress in her own right, but married to a very popular actor. And those two were a powerful Hollywood couple, and Chadwick Boseman over the last couple of weeks, months, just the incredible grace that man showed in the final years of his life when he was battling a disease that very few people knew that he had. But he continued to show up to work and put out quality entertainment. Goodness gracious, this man brought such power in his performance in the Marvel movies. Black Panther, if you haven't seen it, he is very impressive as that character. But then when you know what was going on with him health-wise, and it is. It's a true testament to the human spirit. But we primarily talk about music, and at Red Giant we primarily work with either musicians, older recording artists, songwriters, and or their surviving family members. So the news of Eddie Van Halen passing is brutal. So I'm 52, and I remember in the past 24 hours, I think we all have these different memories. I remember getting the 1984 album. So I was a junior or a junior in high school, and the 1984 album was, of course, iconic and tremendous and sold millions of copies. But I remember having the cassette in the car, hanging out, listening to it for the first time, and singing those songs, listening to it over and over and over and over again, being in awe of his talent. And it was how impactful that man was, but how impactful the band was during that time. And it's incredible, the amount of creativity and art that he has left on the planet, and will be memorialized for many years to come, if not generations to come. So when I heard the news yesterday, it is a glaring reminder. Oh, and we do have these other icons that have passed in the music business this year: Peter Green, Little Richard, Neil Peart, the drummer for Rush, Kenny Rogers, if you're into country music or even pop music in the 80s and 90s. The Gambler is one of the most popular songs ever recorded, ever sung, and Mac Davis recently passing, and there are many others. Please accept my apology if I didn't mention your family member or one of your favorite people. But the point is that it's like a smack in the face. It reminds me, because this is what we do every day, it reminds me how valuable copyrights are, right? How valuable the copyrights that they have created are. But then what are they doing, or what have they done in order to protect their copyrights? And that's what this podcast is all about: protect your copyrights. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, and like I said, this is not easy for me. It's not a great conversation to have, period. I've worked in the past in in other parts of my life with financial advisors, and financial advisors have this kind of conversation all the time. Your friend, your buddy, or your girlfriend who is in the insurance business, they have these conversations all of the time, and they're not easy conversations to have, but they're so essential, because not only are you talking about what's going on immediately, what's going on right now, how do we take care of our finances right now, what kind of insurances do we need to take care of, our car, our house, our life, our health. All of those are important, and we discuss them every single day, and they're so important, but often overlooked, particularly for recording artists, songwriters, intellectual property creators. These assets that you have created in the past, they are not the attention is not being paid to taking care of those assets in order to protect your family, specifically exactly how you would like to protect your family. So let me throw out something that will stir up some controversy. I will say right out of the gate that I am not an attorney, and that you definitely should seek a copyright attorney to work through these questions. We use at Red Giant, we use some of the best copyright attorneys in the country, and so we can definitely assist you in pointing you in the right direction with that process. But even though I'm not an attorney, I do have some understanding, which you can read the same information that I read and gather, make up your own mind, or make a similar understanding of it. But this is what I'll be talking about today, is my understanding of your rights and what is available to you, and you should consult an attorney. Okay? So, first things first, at the risk of being controversial, your will may not protect you in the way that you think it would or is designed to. Okay? There is this concept of recapture, reversions, and terminations, and I'm not expecting you to understand it. And believe me, it took me a full year studying it, debating it, reading about it, to have really a working knowledge of the concept. And so it is not something that you read an article and, oh yeah, I get that. It's complicated. You've heard me say it's convoluted, and potentially it's convoluted on purpose. But recapture, reversions, and terminations, the concept is that after a period of time, several decades, the original artist, the person who granted these rights, if you granted your rights to another entity, you have the opportunity to get those rights back. Now, we can argue through whether you get your rights back, whether you don't get your rights back, how much you get back, blah, 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 blah. I can. That's for a whole. Actually, you know what? That conversation we can have one-on-one. It's not really for one of these podcasts, but I will tell you that it is a conversation. It is a negotiation, and they don't. Any of these Sony ATV, Warner Chappell, Sony. Warner Music Group, Universal Music Group, Universal Music Publishing Group, they don't want to have these conversations. Why? Because they own the rights, and they know how valuable your rights are. Think about their balance sheet. Think about their assets. Think about the conversations they have to have with their stakeholders, their investors. They need to show assets on paper. And one of those assets is yours. And so they want to maintain those assets. If there was a rush on their assets, on all of the music industries and publishing industries and movie industries assets, that all of a sudden authors got them back, well, then overall value would diminish considerably. So that's why they have a pool of lawyers and a bucket of money in order to fight you tooth and nail, to say, hey, you don't have any rights. You think you have rights. The law says you have rights, but you don't have any rights, and here's the reasons why. And so they'll fight you because they don't want to give those rights back. And particularly if they were to give your rights back, holy mackerel, they would have to give rights back to any number of artists. So they're fighting, and there are cases in the court right now, and you may know about them, you may not, but there are cases in the court, case law being case law that exists, but then cases in the court right now that, and if I use the wrong terminology, I'm not, like I said, I'm not an attorney, but there are cases in the court there that are looking at this concept of recapture, reversions, terminations. What are the actual rights of the artist? So, you want to know what your rights are. You want to have a good idea of what your rights are. At Red Giant, we will do everything to make sure that either A, you get your rights back, or if you don't, and you don't want to sue them, and you don't want to fight, and is there a compromise that we can get to? Is there a negotiation? Is there some kind of middle ground that we can meet that is still beneficial? Still everybody gets to work. Still you get a better cut, a bigger slice of the pie. So we do consider those options. But here's what you need to know. Your will is a document that states where you intention, where you would like for these assets to go to the different people or organizations or whatever you choose. However, terminations, reversions, and recapture, the concept of termination exceeds the power of a will. Now, that is a controversial statement. And there are plenty of people out there that may disagree with me, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't feel confident that if you spoke to a copyright attorney that they would back that statement up. But this is the beautiful thing about copyright reversions, terminations, and recapture is that it's federal law, passed by Congress and signed by the president. And it is the law of the land, and so your will doesn't stand up against the law. The law says that when it comes to terminations, right? If your copyright has the ability to be terminated, then there are certain percentages that are broken up per family member, no matter what your will says. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. What matters is that the law says, okay, when you die, X.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Robert King, CEO of Red Giant Rights Group. I want to make sure that you know that we are available to answer your questions. Feel free to call me on my cell phone for a confidential conversation. 917-848-9934. Again, 917-848-9934. And now back to the podcast.
Gets half, and Y gets the other half of your termination rights. Not your royalty stream, but your termination rights. So that's what's really cool about this, is that you have the opportunity to protect your copyrights, and you have the opportunity to employ federal law on your behalf, which Obviously, we assist in that process at Red Giant. And you have these rights. You continue to have these rights. But you need to be informed, particularly if you're an older person. We don't know about tomorrow. We don't have tomorrow necessarily. If you're an older person, you've got to have some team like Red Giant or a copyright attorney or somebody. You got to have them look A, at your will. B is get everything in place so that your family is protected, so that your legacy is protected. Okay, so bottom line, you know already that if any of these copyrights that are released after January 1st, 1978, you know that these copyrights are valuable for the rest of your life plus 70 years. If you don't know that, this is why this conversation is so important. Your assets are generational. They could be more valuable than any other asset that you have over the decades past your time on the planet. So, and then if it was prior to January 1st, prior to December 31st, 1977, then there are other laws, and I don't want to, again, they're convoluted, and they keep adding to them. It was 95 years, now it's 120 years, or what, 2067, whatever. We can tell you exactly if you want to go over your copyright by copyright by copyright by copyright. Of course, we can tell you exactly. But in a general sense, for the purpose of this podcast, the point is you have termination rights. The value of your asset is much longer than your life. It lives much longer past your life. Just think about that for the rest of your life plus 70 years. And if you're in a group, if you're in a band, if there are more than one person who signed that original contract, it's not the rest of your life plus 70 years unless you're the last one alive out of the group. It's the rest of the last one that lives out of the group. Once that person were to die, then that 70 years kicks in. So it could be, if you have a long-standing group member, it could be 70, 80, 90 years, depending on how long they live after your death. So these assets are so valuable to your family, but they have to be protected appropriately. And if they fall within these windows, these termination windows of time, which we've talked about in the past, but if they fall within these windows of time, they must be protected. And even if you're older, even if you're an older person, you gotta have a conversation with somebody so that you have a full understanding, so that you can make solid decisions. And let me just say this as a side note: this isn't your manager's conversation. This isn't your agent's conversation. This isn't your attorney's conversation. This isn't your wife, husband, significant other person, kids. You are the only one on the planet. While you're living, you are the only one who can make this decision, who can protect your copyrights. You're the only one. You're the only one who has the power to do that. So that's why you have to be involved in this. You have to be involved in these conversations. So we encourage you, while you're still alive. Nobody likes talking about it. Nobody wants to talk about their own mortality, and that life is fleeting, and that soon or one day your life may pass. You may no longer exist on the earth. Nobody wants to talk about that. I get it. It's an important conversation, particularly when you own copyrights, when you have intellectual property, when you have assets. It's very important. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you haven't done this yet, call me. Reach out to Red Giant. Reach out to your copyright attorney if you'd like. But we'll walk you through this process and make sure that you're covered, and make sure that you have all that you need to have, all that you need to do in order to protect your copyrights. So you have this the rest of your life plus 70 years. That's one of the variant, or 95 years, or whatever it is. But even if it's 95 years, you're talking about somebody who wrote something in the 60s or 70s. There's still 50 years left of this copyright. I mean, there is, and music. Let's just talk about music for a second. Music had a dip, right? People stopped buying CDs. They stopped buying albums. They stopped buying cassettes. They stopped buying CDs. And now we're doing streaming, but nobody makes any money on streaming. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, let me tell you something. I have clients who are making money. Clients from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s who had popular music back then, and they are still making solid revenue. Are they living in mansions? Are they? Do they have a house in Bel Air if they're not touring? But just living off the royalties? Probably not. But we're talking about assets. A $10,000 asset over 70 years. I'm not very good at math, but $10,000 over 70 years, I think, is $700,000. If your asset is making only $10,000 a year, now what if your assets are making $100,000? Then that's $7 million over 70 years. What if they're making $1 million? Okay, you get the point. So these and that's what they're making right now. Okay, and we're in a dip. The music industry is coming back. It's going to grow. It's going to continue to grow. Streaming is going to get larger. We have no idea what is around the bend. We have no idea what's coming up. We have no idea what will be introduced, what will be developed and invented over the next several decades. But I will tell you that this concept of synchronizations and licensing right now, when there are more production companies than ever, when there are more media outlets than ever, when people are listening to music and using music in these programs more than ever, then your assets have value. Your assets can be extremely valuable just from a synchronization licensing standpoint. So you want to make sure that you're getting the right percentage for that. And you want to make sure that that money is going to the right person, or at least have an understanding of what your rights are. That's why we're having this conversation. It's not an easy conversation. I get it. But that's why we're having the conversation. I got to tell you something that concerns me. And I've been tooting this horn for the company's been around a little over 4 years, and for at least 3 years. We were having a conversation with a popular recording artist, primarily country and branched over to pop, and he was sick. And we reached out to his family and started having these family conversations. We reached out to his. We were being stonewalled by the management team, managers who think that they know what's going on. Managers know how to run a brand. They know how to work with record labels, and how to find the right attorney, and maybe how to negotiate X, Y, and Z. There's some great managers out there, but they're not copyright attorneys. They're not copyright experts, and some of them have never even heard of recapture, reversions, and terminations. And if they have heard of it, they definitely don't understand the ins and outs and the specifics of it. That's a broad generalization. I'm lumping all managers into that, and I would say a small percentage of managers do not are extraordinary when it comes to this particular topic, and they understand it. But otherwise, I've spoken to some of the top managers in the country, and they don't have a full understanding of it, okay? So, and that's fine. I do not judge them. What I do, for the lack of a better word, judge, what I do is object to. What I do not understand is when a manager it stonewalls the process of reviewing what is best for their artist. They've spent a career trying to build this brand. And when that artist goes, more than likely, the manager probably is going to move on to a living artist. And what is the surviving family members? What do they do with these assets? The manager has not finished the job of protecting the family by not reviewing something like this, the will, and how recapture, reversions, and terminations affect the will. So this has got to change, guys, and it's men, women. This has got to change. It's nothing personal. Some people get they they get offended that somebody comes in and knows something about that they don't know about. Look, you don't know about it. Okay, fine. I don't know how to do your job. This is something that's very specific. You know what? I liken it to, and you may have heard me use this before, but I liken it to if you're sick and you go to a physician because you have chest pains. Your primary care physician knows X, Y, and Z. They're probably going to send you to a cardiologist. So cardiology, this is a specialty, and that's why we encourage people to seek out those who are experts in this particular thing. So to wrap up that story, we were being stonewalled by the management team who didn't necessarily know everything about this. And so they didn't do X, Y, and Z this was several years ago. They did not do X, Y, and Z in order to protect their copyrights, in order to protect the family members. And this was a fractured, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way. It's just, the way a tree has different branches. It was a family that had many different branches, different marriages, different children from different marriages, and the like. And so many families are like this. And they didn't do what they needed to do in order to protect themselves. And now, several years later, I can't give you an update specifically on this because I've had to let it go. But now they're in court. When some, if not most, of these issues could have been worked out before the artist passed, and would save the family so much grief, so much additional grief, dealing with very valuable assets. My friends, your assets are valuable. You may think, oh my gosh, it only made $100. I will argue that $100 over 70 years is valuable. And frankly, Red Giant takes it upon as a responsibility to figure out how to turn that 100 into 200. Or turn that 1,000 into 2,000 or 10,000. And so the good news is that you're creative. The good news is that some of you are prolific. And the good news is some of you still have unrecorded hits or songs that were never published. Or, there's just no telling what can be done with your brand, even though your popularity was primarily several decades ago. So, please, I've rambled on enough. So I'll wrap this up. But you have to understand this frustrated feeling that overwhelms me, particularly when I see somebody like Eddie Van Halen. I can't tell you. I don't know Mr. Van Halen's family. I heard that his son released a statement. I don't know what his son knows about copyrights. I don't know what the other Van Halens, I don't know if they've executed the paperwork that needed to be completed while he was still alive. And if they didn't, then what happens to those copyrights and how will it affect the family? I don't know the answers to all of those things. What I do know is that if they haven't done it, then it's just an additional nightmare. It's an additional grief. It is it wears. I've seen it. I've seen it where it wears on a family. Over a period of time, I had one client, and she was a widow of a popular artist, and she was in court, I believe, for 14 years working out the royalties, and it devastated her life. It is just not only the amount of money that you can spend on attorneys during that time, but the emotional taxation that takes place for you to have to deal with to deal with these rights. These rights. Who owns these rights? These rights are valuable, friends. And so we want to get all of that done long before your last days on earth. Even if you've had a family member pass, and maybe this wasn't done, then we got to take a look, and we got to see where your assets now are, and the value of those assets. So, not to make this too much of a commercial, but feel free to reach out to me and let's have this conversation. It's a tough conversation to have. I know it is. I don't necessarily like having it, but it is our goal with all of our clients at Red Giant that these conversations have taken place with our older clients, and that's why we call it Red Giant, because a Red Giant is an older star. And so with our older clients, all of our clients are older, we have had these conversations with next steps, what is going on in the next part of life, and what we need to do in order to protect their assets once they pass. Feel free to reach out. Check in on the other podcasts and the other topics that are part of the Protect Your Copyrights podcast. We look forward to having additional conversations with you. Call me anytime. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Protect Your Copyrights with Red Giant Rights Group CEO Robert King. Come on! For a confidential conversation with Robert, give him a call on his cell phone at 917-848-9934. Once again, that's 917-848-9934. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and be sure to join us next time on Protect Your Copyrights with Robert King.